Hello, welcome to Chapter 12's review of homework problems. Here we have a company that lists out different assumptions about their next year projected sales. They expect an increase of 15% in their sales from 8 million to 9.2 million. Their assets at the end of the current year are 5 million. They expect their assets to grow at the same rate as their projected sales because they're operating at full capacity. At the end of the current year, current liabilities were 1.4 million, consisting of 450,000 of accounts payable, 500,000 of notes payable, and 450,000 of accruals. The after-tax profit margin is expected to be 6%, and the forecasted payout ratio is 40%. Let's use the additional funds needed equation to forecast their additional funds needed for the coming year. The additional funds needed is calculated as required increase in assets minus the increase in spontaneous liabilities minus the increase in retained earnings. Spontaneous liabilities refers to the company's payables, accounts payables, and accruals. Written differently, the additional funds needed is calculated as the assets divided by sales times the change in sales, which is the required increase in assets, minus the spontaneous liabilities divided by sales, which is the ratio, times the change in sales, minus the profit margin times next year's expected sales times 1 minus the payout ratio. 1 minus the payout ratio is equal to the net income that is retained. Let's take a look. So first, let's calculate our required increase in assets. We'll do this by calculating first our capital intensity ratio, which is the amount of assets required per dollar of sales. So our assets are 5 million divided by 8 million, and this is going to be times our change in sales, which is 9.2 million minus 8 million, said differently, 1.2 million. Just making sure I have the right number of zeros in there. Then our increase in spontaneous liabilities is going to equal our spontaneous liabilities, which is 450,000 in accounts payable plus 450,000 in accruals, divided by, again, our sales for the year. Gives us our ratio. This is going to be multiplied by our change in sales again, which is 1.2 million. Added an extra zero there. And our increase in retained earnings is equal to 6%, which is our profit margin, times next year's sales, which is 92 million, times our payout ratio, 1 minus our payout ratio of 40%. Therefore, our AFN equals 750 minus 135 minus 331, 200. $283, 800. Okay, let's look at problem 12-4. Here we have another company with some assumptions. They generated 5 million in sales during the year, and its year-end total assets were 2.5 million. Also at the end of the year, their current liabilities were 1 million, consisting of 300 in notes payable, 500 in accounts payable, and 200 in accruals. Looking ahead to 2017, the company estimates that its assets must increase at the same rate as sales, its spontaneous liabilities wouldn't increase at the same rate as sales, and its profit margin would be 7%, and its payout ratio will be 80%. How large a sales increase can the company achieve without having to raise funds externally? That is, what is its self-supporting growth rate? So how do we solve for that? Well, let's start with our additional funds needed equation, as we previously discussed in 12-1. Here, we can plug in the information that we know and rearrange the formula to calculate for S1, which is essentially next year's sales, where the AFN is equal to 0 additional funds needed. So let's start with what we know. We know that we have for our assets, we have 2.5 million in assets at the end of the year, divided by sales of 5 million as our ratio. That's going to be multiplied by our change in sales. So equals 0.5 times, I'll just put an S for change in sales. Okay, I'm just doing it this way so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Then we look at our liabilities, which is going to equal our spontaneous liabilities of $500,000 in accounts payable plus $200,000 of accruals divided by, again, our sales of $5 million, which gives us a ratio of 0.14, and that is going to be multiplied by S1. Okay. And then our retained earnings is equal to 7%. Okay. 7% times S1 times 1 minus our payout ratio of 80%. Said differently, that is equal to 0.014 times S1. That is simply 7% times 1 minus 80%. See, 0.014. Okay? So now, let's use algebra to walk through the rest of the problem. We're going to multiply the 0.5. This is change in sales, not S1. So these are both times the change in sales. So we can do 0.5 times 0.14 is 0.07 times the change in sales. I'm sorry, not times, it's going to be minus. Okay, so that gives us 0.36 times the change in sales minus the 0.1014 times S1. And then we know that the change in sales is equal to 0.36 times S1 minus S0 minus 0.014 times S1. Okay, so now we know that 0.36 times S1 minus 5 million, which is our current year sales, times 0.014 times S1. And then that's going to equal to 0.36 S1 minus 1.8 million minus 0.014 S1. Okay, that is calculated, the 1.8 equals to 0.36 times 5 million. There's the 1.8. And then we take the 1.8 million divided by the 0.34. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay, let's calculate what we're going to divide this by. So first it's going to equal 0.36 minus 0.014 is 0.346 S1 minus 0.8 million. So S1 is equal to 0.8 million divided by 0.346, which is equal to 1 million. So the level of sales where no additional funds needed are 5,202,312 for the following year. Our current year sales are 5 million. Therefore, our sales can, sorry, an extra zero there. Our sales can grow by an additional $202,312 before we need to borrow any additional funds. I know it took a while to go through this because I was writing out the formulas so you guys could follow it as we go through it. Okay? And now let's look at 12.9. This is forecasting an income statement. So we're given a set of balance sheet and income statements for the year ended December 31st, 2016. Suppose that in the following year, sales increase by 10% over their 16 level, and that 17 dividends will increase to 112,000. Not increase by. That's a key difference there. The problem is asking us to forecast the financial statements using the forecasted financial statement method. Assume the firm operated at full capacity in 2016. Use an interest rate of 13% and assume that any new debt will be added at the end of the year. So we're going to forecast interest expense based on the debt balance at the beginning of the year. This again is an important distinction. Cash does not earn any interest income, and assume that all new debt will be in the form of a line of credit. So how do we do this? Well, our starting point is 2016. Then we need to figure out what our forecast basis is. We know from the information here that our sales are going to equal a 10% increase over 2016. Whoops, doesn't like it when I put an equal sign there. Okay. And our operating costs are going to equal to the same rate, same percentage. Oops, having some typing issues here. It's going to equal percent of sales, of 2017 sales, similar to 16. And then we know that our interest is going to equal 13% of debt. All right, so let's start with our sales. It's going to equal an increase of 10%, so equals that times 1.10. Okay, and let's calculate the ratio of operating cost to sales. So it's operating cost divided by sales. And we're going to multiply that by our 2017 sales, so the ratio stays the same. Okay. So EBIT is sales minus operating costs. And now let's calculate our debt. So it's equal to 0.13, so our interest expense times our debt at the beginning of the year. Our debt at the beginning of the year was a $156,000 note payable. So our interest is equal to $20,280. And our pre-tax earnings is $332,208. Our taxes are 40%. And that gives us net income of $199,217. Here, our addition to retained earnings is simply net income minus dividends. And we know that our dividends for 2017 are going to be equal to $112,000 per the information given to us. So we can calculate our addition to retained earnings as $199 minus the $112, which is $87,217. So that's how we would calculate our 2017 pro forma income statement. Thank you, and hopefully you found this helpful.